Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Matthew Mugno alongside my brother Mike, our best pal Stevo. Gonna dissect the Rangers season, and we're not gonna go through all the mire of the swamp we went through to get here. Just entertain some ideas. What went wrong? Most of us know. Some numbers, some records, season by season outlook, player and personnel criticism, everyone's favorite topic, and what could be in the deck of cards for next season, whether that's the lineup or head coach. Well, boys, no one mourns the wicked. This season, we can finally rest. I know we all feel the same. I know everyone that's listening to this podcast feels the same. But we would be doing an injustice to not go through it all. So let's go through it all.
Let's do it. Let's talk some puck. We'll jump right in. I like how you got a smile on your face. This isn't the annual funeral episode isn't like how it was last year. This year, this is like a happy funeral. The Wicked Witch is dead. We're happy. Get this crap over with. So let's do it. Let's talk some puck.
All right, boys. So right now, listen, we know there's 2 games left, and we love Sam Rosen. Obviously, the whole fan base at this point really is only listening for Sam Rosen. But we decided that there's no real once they were eliminated, there's no reason to continue talking about the game on the ice. 37, 36, and 7, 6th in the Metro, 12th in the Eastern Conference, 23rd in the NHL. First 41 games, 19, 20, and 2. They started 12, 4, and 1. The last 41 games, 18, 16, and 5. At the time of the JT Miller trade, 24, 23, and 4. After that trade, which seems like I think, peak of the season in a way, or at least what we thought would recalibrate the team, 13, 13, and 3. Home record, 18, 19, and 3. Have to win on home ice in front of the fans. And by my estimation, you guys got a kick out of this before. 28 bad losses. I know Ryan Mead tweeted about this, and it had a lot of traction about which loss was the worst to the fans. I don't really feel like getting into that. There's no purpose, but 28 bad losses were a part of that conversation. And they're the only team in NHL history, club, to lose a season after winning the President's Trophy twice, 1992-93, 2024-25. So, boys, in the macro, they made the playoffs 4 out of 8 seasons. Really only 3 of those years because 2020 was the qualifying bubble. They were eliminated in 3. Most fans don't even consider that a playoff year. But their numbers didn't look too bad on the surface this year. Penalty kill, goals for, goals against, somehow. But the underlying numbers and the stats by player were very bad. So I want to hear off the jump, at least in terms of the entire picture of this team, what you think as we move into the summer.
Well, let me tell you something, boys. This is the first year that I'm happy that the Rangers season is over, and that just crushes me. Because even in 2018-19, they were a bad team. They were seventh in the division that year. Like, they were a bad team. Everybody knew they were going to be bad. The record was 32, 36, and 14. Like, that's bad. Somehow this season felt way worse than that. But going into next season, I mean, where do you even go? Where do you start? We have so much to talk about this epi. This season was an absolute roller coaster. And man, it feels good that it's over. Steve, what do you got to add on that?
Yeah, Mike, I'm with you 100%. And I think this is, and I'll pitch this over to you guys to see if you agree. This is probably the most disappointing season in my entire life as a New York Ranger fan, coming off the expectation last year, being the best team in the NHL and, pivoting, just building off of that. You were 6 games away from raising Lord Stanley Cup. And this is the performance that you come out with. So for me, I mean, I can only imagine how our parents feel. This would be a great question for them or anybody, who's been around way longer than us. But I mean, for me, this is the most disappointing season as a fan in my life. I'll pitch it over to you guys. Do you guys agree with that?
Absolutely. And I'd also like to add what makes it the most disappointing was at some point in the season, I remember we were talking about, the fact that the Rangers are not a 5-on-5 team. I mean, that's been the narrative for plenty of years now. It seems like the collapse of the special teams, especially the power play. I thought that was the reason why things were going so poorly. But after a deeper look, it's so much deeper than that. And that's what's really frustrating is, for years it had been the narrative of this team is going to collapse when special teams collapse. I mean, I always go back to the famous example of the 2010 San Diego Chargers, were first the NFL for offense, first the NFL for defense, but last in the league for special teams, and that's why they missed the playoffs. And while I think that's a major contributor with the Rangers this year, it's so unfortunate that that's not the reason, because that's a fixable problem. There's so much more going on here than just that.
I think when we're talking about context, that's the most important thing in the conversation of, is this the worst record we've seen in a long time? Arthur Staple had said that. Dan Rosen had alluded to it when we had interviewed them. 2018-19, though, was we're tearing this down. And Mike, you work in the psychology field. There's something to be said about the way JD and Jeff Gordon approached PR, whether you agree with it or not. That set an expectation. We are sending a letter to the fans to inform them about a decision that's going to change how they perceive the club. We're going to rebuild. We all know these things, but point being, you finish 32, 36, and 4. No one cares because you're saying, well, what picks are we getting? Oh, we went from 6. The other day was the anniversary of going up in the draft order to select second overall. 2019-20, they were 7th in the Metro. It just happened to be a really deep year for the division. It was probably the best year for the division. And when it returned to being the prominent quarter marker in the NHL, 37, 28, and 5, not that much better. Now, there were games left on the table and they were red hot before COVID happened. But point being, there's expectation. 2021, there was a lot of drama to start the year. And then they really figured things out and lost at the very end and then radically shifted. So it feels like in a lot of ways there's perception that goes along with that. And it all comes from the captain of the ship. You had success, you had pitfalls. But overall, it feels like this year had the most drama. And I think that's what the fans will remember. You do remember stats, you remember championships, sometimes the loser, but most of all, you remember the stories. And I think why this year was a disaster was because all year it wasn't just player management issues. It was the long story of Capo Caco, cutting Barkley Goodrow and the player that he was to the locker room. The way they went about the Truba situation and then having a nationally televised game the next night. Like, there was so many layers that I think affected the story of the season that made this feel like the worst. Although I would argue it wasn't much better than some of what we've seen.
Well, here's a very good point, Shives. You brought up narratives. Humans love storytelling, humans love narrative. And that was the thing in 2018-19. You bought the narrative. The narrative, the story for the next couple seasons is going to be, we're going to tear it down. We're going to draft. We're going to look at free agents. We're going to, like, there was a narrative to follow coming out of that letter. And that's something that you can see into the future with it. You can follow that narrative. There was no narrative built into the season. The narrative was, you're going to compete for the Stanley Cup this year. Anything less was a failure. That was the narrative. And what happened? We got a completely different story. It's basically like getting a book that says this is on the American Revolution, and you open up to page 20 and they're talking about Napoleon. You're like, what the hell? That's exactly what happened this season. Ranger fans did not know what was coming next. And once you heard about, like, okay, Goodrow got cut, that was weird. It was bizarre. But I think a lot of Ranger fans said, well, in the past we had faith with maybe okay, some Ranger fans maybe not, but we had a consensus faith in the front office that Drury was going to make the best moves for the team, and then it slowly devolved into the Trouba drama, and then the Kako drama, and then they just fell off a cliff, and then you get JT Miller, just that push and pull with absolutely no vision for the future, or at the very least, an expectation for the future. You used that word before. Expectations were just obliterated. And I think that's what made this feel far, far worse. When you don't have a story, you have no idea what's coming next. And humans hate the unknown.
Yeah.
Just a compass, right, Steve? Like just that gravitational pull. Where are we going? It felt like that day to day, like you said, Mike. I don't even think it was necessarily 2, 3 years down the road, but like right now, like what is are we gonna rebuild? Are we gonna
Right.
retool? What's the direction?
Yeah,
Right.
I think to add a layer onto, that expectation layer, why was that expectation shattered? It was because of a lack of structure, whether it was a lack of structure in the roster, whether it was a lack of structure in the way we played, defensively, and a lack of structure in coaching. I think quite a lot of these challenges fall on the coach, whether it's the no-show efforts, whether it's the defense, whether it's the lack of adjustments, in the power play. You look at Mike, you mentioned the historically bad 1 for 45, 46, whatever the heck it was. There was no adjustments, even going back to the Zach Jones early on, situation in November, December, all of it was managed so poorly. And the amount of games that we lost in the last 3 minutes that we were up by more than 2 goals was absolutely disgusting. Also, what are we, second in the league in too many men on the ice? To me, that's all coaching. The coaching was absolutely, you couldn't have gotten any worse from a coaching perspective this year. So that's why I'll lead it off here. For me, Lavi's done. He's toast. What do you boys think?
He's done.
The only counter I heard was, which this isn't reporting, it's just kind of I heard the idea and I thought about it. You entertain everything at this point. Was, well, why would they keep him along at this point when he should have really been fired 2 weeks ago, at least last week? And although I thought about it, I think what disturbs me more when I think about all of that in full, if they were to keep him, is not only what that does to the perception of the club. You know, you'll never back the coach if you're the manager. You can't at the NHL level. So not only that, but also the fact that, well, if they are going to fire him anyway, you saw those poor decisions just in the last few games of not playing Hoffman and Perot that make you question even more why they didn't fire him earlier. So I do think things again are very muddy. And I think that doesn't help with the way the season's ending because it's not just coast, like it's not a slow coast out. It's still kind of ugly. And I think that's why the head coach conversation is very hot, even to end the season.
This just in, by the way, Jets clinched the President's Trophy, which
Good
I
for the
think we all knew was
Jets.
coming.
Good for the Jets. We'll see. I
Yeah.
still stand by my prediction, when I call them frauds when we play them early in the year. But we'll have a Jets funeral episode in a few weeks, so don't worry. Back to the Rangers.
But also talking about the coaches, was also disappointing is the assistant coaching. You don't really hear much about assistant coaching when you're fans. You don't really know what's going on. You kind of hear that maybe an assistant coach leads the defense, maybe an assistant coach leads the special teams. And I mean, if what I have heard and what you guys probably heard is true, that Phil Housley was in charge of the defense. Wow. Wow. The drop off in defense was absolutely precipitous. I mean, our goals against we had 252 goals against, which is 21st in the NHL. That is a precipitous drop off, especially when we had a big kind of core four on defense with Fox, Lindgren, Miller, and Trouba look like stalwarts. They look like the 2017 Predators, for goodness sakes. And what's also disappointing is, speaking of special teams and coaches, the drop off for the power play. Last year, our power play was 26.4%, third in the NHL. You drop down to 17.9%, just 27th. That is a precipitous drop off. And like I said, if it's really the assistant coaches that are leading that, man, I mean, of course, all the blame sits on Lavi. But also at the same time, if those guys are struggling too, then geez, it's a lot easier to get rid of assistant coaches than head coaches. But man, that just also does not help any of their cases.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
think you get anything out of firing, him though, 2 weeks ago. And I think that's part of the reason why he's sitting there at the end of games and saying, I don't have a message for the team. Yeah, I don't go in the locker room, because he knows it and we all know it. He's done. At this point he's checked out. And to recircle, I'll be the one to reel it back when you said, there really wasn't one game that ended the season. For me, there was one game that ended the season, and that was that Ottawa game. The game that we were winning. What was it? 3 goals. You win that game, you are 4 points ahead of Ottawa in the standings, and that really propelled Ottawa, and that really sunk us. And to me, after that, we really couldn't recover from that. And that ended our season. And ever since then, Laviolette knows. Maybe they told him that he's done. We'll let you finish out this year. You got nothing to play for. The Rangers really don't. In a year that you've had so much antics. Like you've said, Matt, you did a good job in the first 2 minutes of the epi, summoning it all up. You don't get anything out of adding more antics, of getting rid of Laviolette. Just finish out the year, and as soon as the last 2 seconds of Sam's final game is over, Lavi's out, and you're going to see all these changes. So I think that's why it's been all dry recently. And I think, in my vote, Lavi's gone, but I think, and I'll open up another can of worms here, I think Jury should stay.
okay, and this is big because this is where we're moving towards, folks. That kind of puts a bow on the season, but you step 2 seconds outside of that game in Tampa or against Tampa, and the decisions have to be made that will guide you into next season. One, general manager, two, head coach, because those are institutions for the club. And then three, your player personnel, because those two decisions, at least one or the head coach decision as well, are going to directly guide you to what you do this summer. The player and the team Chris Drew is looking to build is going to be very different than another general manager. Or it might be a little bit similar, but not the same. And we've seen that he's already spent on players at the trade deadline. Carson Soucy, Will Borgen, Vakanainen. So I think part of this is, do you give the keys to Drury and continue to move forward and see what his vision is? Or do you say enough is enough? There was too much that went on in his tenure that was volatile. The Gallant firing was pretty embarrassing, I would say, right? Like egg on the organization's face. He stepped into the situation post Tom Wilson, and then this season was a catastrophe. So I guess for you guys, I am on the fence, but I love to know, open that discourse too as well, Steve. Like, how do you see Drury getting canned? I think there's a possibility, but I also don't know.
I'll start us off. I don't think there's a possibility where Drury gets canned. And here's why. I think he was able to pivot very quickly, and he set up a nice little, I don't want to say he put forth a future plan, but he shifted gears and put this franchise in the right direction, whether that's getting rid of Truba, getting rid of Lindgren, getting rid of VZ and Kako, and retooling, getting those picks in order, and then got some nice pulls in. Not going to mention Vakanainen as one of them, but Borgen was a good one. And I think those were all the first few baby steps into what should be a bigger plan. And, this isn't a free agency preview, but we are going to need a splash. There isn't going to be somebody that walks into the door. There isn't going to be somebody that we promote from the minors that comes up and fills a big hole. We're going to need a splash in free agency. And listen, we got some cap space. Let's go out there and let's get some. I'm not I got a few players in mind. I'll save it for the offseason preview. But look at Vinny Trocheck. It might be somebody on the smaller scale, but you look at if you could bring in the right person and see what they bring to this team. I think that's something that I think will really benefit us. And I think for me, Jury should stay. I think it's only going to open up a can of worms if you get rid of Jury and you bring in somebody else, and now somebody else is going to bring in a brand new vision. And again, we have stubborn players, Panarin and Zibanejad. They're hard to play on the ice. Now tell them, okay, we're pivoting to a new vision. See how that goes. So I think Jury stays. Mike, what do you think?
I think Drury stays too. I give him a year. I give him a year. If the Rangers make the playoffs and are trending in the right direction next year, he stays. If they miss the playoffs and it's another volatile season, he's gone. But as of this offseason, no, I don't think so. Like you said, I think it's too quick to change the vision. He's got something. That's what irks me about Drury is there's something that like he's not an idiot. Like there are guys like that like Ken Holland makes boneheaded mistakes left and right. Like there are guys who are idiots running organizations. You're like, how in the hell is he running? Drury rarely makes bad moves, but as the man in charge, he has to fix this club's problem with player and asset management. Because we were talking about this before, me, Chives, and Big Al on the phone. Like one or two players, like Kravtsov being a weird case, Elias Anderson being a head case, like, okay, that's fine. But when you have a trend where Kako goes to Seattle and is he's a stud. Hedl goes to Vancouver. He's probably going to do really well there too. And on Victor Mancini's playing with Quinn Hughes. You can go on and on and on about these guys. And then you see like guys like Locke struggled this year. You see it, Ryan Graves. I know he wasn't necessarily in the Drury era, but this club has a problem with player management. And he's got to work on that. He's got to work on how we use our players when they're getting playing time, when they're not getting playing time. It all goes to the top. Even if the coach is making these poor decisions with like sitting Perot night after night, Drury's got to come down from the box and say, dude, play the kid. That's why we brought him up. That's your job. So maybe that's something he's got to learn. I don't know. Is it something that he doesn't want to do? So to me, I give Drury another year. If he doesn't fix those problems, or at least trend to fix those problems, gone.
I agree. I also question what the organization wants overall. Because you are right, there are fingerprints of the next kind of core that he's trying to build. But I also question if they go with a new direction, are they going to try to rebuild versus retool? I mean, these are just conversations I think that are more general, right? I think that they're going to stick with him and they're going to retool because you have Artemi Panarin, Adam Fox, and Igor Shesterkin. And that was the conversation years ago was once Artemi Panarin became a New York Ranger, you could no longer rebuild the way you thought you were going to. You had to speed it up. But at this point, are you going to try and speed up a retool again with Panarin 2 more years on the books? Fox 4 more, an aging core, 2 players that are likely gone in the offseason at minimum. I just question how it's like their foot's halfway in the lukewarm water. They're not fully in and they're not standing out. And I think they have to be a lot clearer about where they want to be because I think the in between is a recipe for disaster again.
Yeah, it's even clearer now than it was before in the beginning of the season that they were clearly unsure at the beginning of the season. I agree with you 100%. I mean, you should go to MSG and tell Mr. Drury yourself that he's got to be clear going into next season on this. But as we transition, I do agree with you. This needs to be a retool off season. I don't think we're there at a rebuild point. I think that this is it. This is the last retool before you hit the complete rebuild mode. You still have the pieces there. And again, when you have Igor and net, I mean, every year you're in you're in it to win it. You have the piece that a lot of teams go, decades without, so the Rangers are in it. And here's another piece. You look at, I said in the opening, this was probably one of the worst Ranger seasons, of my lifetime. But you also look at it, we're going to finish ahead of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And this was one of their best seasons in recent memory. So that just goes to show you that, all isn't that bad compared to everything else. Now, yeah, it is bad in Rangerland, but we're still at a level where we can compete. And if we don't go 6-18 or whatever the hell it is in November and December and completely collapse, this team is still, well primed to equip. You have JT Miller coming in on a full year. Let's not forget about that. That is very key. So, by the way, if you like Mike's hat, like this epi, that is fire hat. So, Mike, I'll ask you:
Thank you.
rebuild, retool. What are you looking at?
Well, you bring up a very good point that this team, they still have pieces. They still have pieces. And I know some of them, like Kreider, God, it breaks my heart that we're just going to write him off. But there are some pieces that, all right, they're not going to be contributing anymore.
Well, let's start, Mike. I just want to mention salary cap breakdown for the next few years, because I think we're starting to trend towards being critical of some players and where we think they'll end up and what the lineup's going to be. I just want to mention the salary cap before we get into that.
Go ahead.
The limit this year is 88 mil this summer, which basically starts now for the Rangers. They only have 2.8 in space.
Yikes.
So they have to make trades. Like, this isn't free agency year or summer. This is like they have to move pieces or pieces have to go. 2025, 26, the cap limit is projected to be 95.5, trending up, right? Which was the conversation in midway through the year. That gives the New York Rangers 9.1 mil. And then 26, 27, the projection for the NHL is 104 mil, and that gives the Rangers 39 mil. So it quickly goes up, but for the next 2 years, where you have Artemi Panarin and you have Igor Shesterkin in his prime, and no one's getting younger, you have 2.8 million this summer. So I think that is going to be a major part of how the players are in the meetings to end the year, and what we talk about at least before this summer.
Man, 39 mil looks really good. Do you remember when the salary cap used to be like 65 mil? Less than that. But no, that puts a lot into perspective, because I was talking about, like, well, you still got some guys performing. Now, I mean, geez, like Loff. I love him. What do you do? I mean, do you keep him? Do you not keep him? And then I say that because I'm sorry, I'm looking at the what we're talking about, like the lineup going into the offseason, not for next year, but going into the offseason.
Yeah.
Like Zibanejad on the wing. We're really going to pay him? What's his contract? 8.5?
He is 31 years old, 8.5 until 27, 28, full no move. He has to tell you that he wants to be traded.
Yeah.
That's bad. That is bad that you signed.
He's supposed to be your 1C.
Yes. Well, you know my take. I've never thought that Mika Zibanejad was nor would be elite. But oh my God, that is what do I want to say here? You're gonna have to force him out like you did with Trouba.
Well, again, does that factor in how Drury's perceived by the league and by the club? And at this point, how many players truly care? Because let's be for real, guys. The players were the reason this season sank. It was a full organizational collapse, but it started with underperformance. And Zibanejad, 18, 40, 58, 84th in points in the NHL this year, where the last 2 years 46th, before that 18th in 22-23. But like you're saying, I also think they all relate to each other because can Chris Drury pull one more stunt off like that without being completely like he would completely lose the players that I think are still there in the room that weren't brought in
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
or are too young to really care. But also part of that is like, should the players have cared so much when Goodrow was cut?
That's
It's not
also a
for me
really
to
good point.
decide, but
No,
it's definitely cold-blooded moves. He's cold-blooded.
yeah. Back to Mike, what you mentioned on Zibanejad. I don't think, and this could be the same for next year, this year, all the remaining years. I don't think the Rangers need Zibanejad to step up and be a one C. I think they just need him to play like how he was when he first came into New York, and I think part of that goes to the pieces around him. And you look at Chris Kreider as one of them. All the years that Mika had good years, he had Chris Kreider, also having good years, dropping 50. Chris Kreider had a horrible year, and I'm talking even before he got put on a doom line on line 3 with people who are might not even be playing in the NHL next year. Even before JT Miller, came in, Kreider was not good. Chris Kreider was invisible, for most of the season. You look at how many assists he had. I don't think he had more than 6 assists. So, I mean, Kreider was not good. I'll let you jump in.
I'll counter this, and this is a big counter. You're paying Chris Kreider to be. He's getting 6.5 until 2027. You're paying him to be a solid
Power
leader,
forward.
solid winger, and a power play merchant. That's what he's always been. So that to me is like, all right, do I love that we're paying Kreider 6.5 for a guy who had 6 assists? No. But you can still play him on the third line. He's still valuable. I know he had a terrible season, but we know that he was going through injury issues. I feel like Kreider, maybe it's just because he's Chris Kreider to all of us. Maybe I'm more willing to give him a little bit of a lift, but Zibanejad, 8.5. We're paying him 8.5 mil to be a first line center, and he's not going to play at first line center. Then why in the hell are we paying him that? That's my problem with Zibanejad. Is listen, if we were paying him Chris Kreider money, maybe a little bit less. All right, I guess you can move him over to the wing. All right, fine. Like if it was like Vinny Trocheck that we moved over to the wing. All right, we're paying him 5.5. He wasn't being paid to be the top center. All right. We expected Mika Zibanejad to be the number 1 elite center for this club. Moving him over to the second line wing for 8.5 mil that he's also not producing on is a major problem for this team.
I agree. And I think when we assess Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad, Mike put this perfectly before, so mind if I borrow what you said.
Go ahead.
They put a lot into a player that wasn't a proven 1C and a guy that made a killing as a power play merchant.
By the way, it's
With
not a bad thing to be a power play merchant when you're producing like Chris Kreider was as a power play merchant. But go ahead.
right 26 power play goals in 21-22. And I said this to Zaretsky yesterday. I said, this is a player, though, that when they signed his contract, when JD, there was that Buchnevich car accident and he announced that they signed him. At the time, there were a lot of people that disagreed. I believed in him. I said, we've bridged him for this long. Let's give him a chance. And he, I think, in a lot of ways, overperformed what many expected. He had a 50-goal season, 2 30-goal seasons. He was everything and more. But I think when we start to move forward and assess Chris Kreider, I think his relationship after Jim Ramsey was fired, the way he took the Goodrow and Trouba situation and being on the trade memo, I think at this point, for what he's earning, I think he has to be moved. And I think you're going to get like a 3rd round draft pick. It'll be a blemish, but I think at this point at 33, are you really getting 82 games, playoff performances, and a 30, 50 goal season out of Kreider? I just don't know. And I also feel like the injuries to me, I take them as a writing on the wall that he's not going to be playing full seasons anymore. So, although I could be 100% wrong, and at the 34-minute mark of this pod, I'm going to get grilled for years to come. That's what I believe right now, just based on those tea leaves. And I think the problem is Kreider's easier to get rid of and Zibanejad's harder to get rid of, yet it feels like those should be reversed based on their situations this year.
I'd just like to add before Steve, just real quick.
Go ahead.
Chris
You're
Kreider
looking real quiet over there.
sorry. Chris Kreider has shown us that he can rebound. Mika Zibanejad has absolutely plummeted and plummeted and plummeted. So that's why I have a little bit more faith in Kreider. Go ahead, Steve.
That's true. No, listen, I'm gonna rebuttal what you said, Matt. But I do think when you say after the season we just had, it's really hard for me to rebuttal what you just said. But I will say you look at it last year, going back to my point about we don't need Zibanejad to be a 1C. Mika wasn't, a 1C last year. We won the President's Trophy. Would you consider Mika being a 1C last year? No, he wasn't. He didn't have an outstanding year last year. But I think that goes to the structure and the core of this team, having Trocheck, Panarin, Loff, Fox, Igor. If you have Mika just play a little bit more up to his level, and again, that's really tough to add. That's a big ask considering the season we just had. But hypothetically, next year you have JT Miller thrown in there for a full season. If you could just the Panarin brings stability. Playoffs is a different story, but in the regular season, you know what you're going to get from Panarin. If we could somehow strap Loft to a chair, and get him right in the offseason, he plays well. Vinny comes in, who knows, I want to talk about leader in a second, but Vinny comes in, he starts playing well. Igor's Igor. Fox, if he turns things around, this team is at the core of things. I think is still one of the best in the division. Maybe even the conference. So that's why I don't think we don't really need at this point. And I agree with you. You're not going to get Kreider, to step up and Mika at this point. I do agree 100% what you said, Mike. I think that was perfect. You laid it out. You're not going to get really Kreider Mika to turn things around and be reliable. You cannot, but I think if you get him to just be a little bit better, I still think that would help this team and go a really long way. So I think it comes down to the core, and I agree, next season is the last hurrah for this core. I think if the Rangers are at the same point this year, the next year, Chris Kreider is going to be in the same position that Brock Nelson was in this year for the Islanders.
I think Kreider's gone.
In the offseason.
I think Kreider's gone, gone. Like third-round pick we get in return. And listen, I'm going to save that more in depth for later. But I think that with the way things are trending, there's going to have to be more change. But I agree, Steve, there is this sentiment, though, that you sound like you have some hope that Zibanejad can kind of get the up curve going. But I think that's because of his contract situation, solely because you can't move him. If there was a 15-team no trade list like Kreider, you'd be like, oh my gosh, we got to get rid of him. Do you have faith in if Mika Zibanejad had no anchor on his contract, Steve-O, would you believe in him?
No, I would not. I'm saying that in order to get this team right, I think that's what we need.
That's a good point.
Both of you right now, give me a percentage of how much or how confident you are that Mika can turn things around.
50.
15.
The fact that you had to think, Mike, that just says it all.
15%. I don't trust him. 2 back-to-back.
What are you, a Geico salesman?
Just 2 back. That's a good one.
Or the Rangers power play percentage.
Yeah.
But
start doing the hockey stand-up.
It's so sad, though. Zibanejad had 91 points in 22-23. Panarin this year led the team with 89.
He has 2 more games to break the 90
I hope he
threshold.
does. I think I do. The more I looked into some of these numbers preparing for the pod, it hurts to see how well Panarin did. He's top 10 in points, and we just blew that. Like, you're not like, you have 2 more years of Panarin. That's the thing that's tough. And again, this goes to the top. Like, there's 2 years. Is it 2 years that you perceive as Stanley Cup championship years? I think you should, but I also thought that last year. So I don't know.
That's a really good
Oh,
question.
Steve-O, you wanted to talk about Vinny T, and that's a perfect segue because of Panarin. Vincent Trocheck I think he's going to play with Panarin the rest of their tenure. I just don't see them splitting them up. They have
Oh,
great
agreed.
chemistry. He also has a better face-off percentage this year, which is crazy compared to last year because he led the league. But the one thing, I think he is the next leader of this team. I think anyone who denies having a leader for a team, like in Messier's write-up for ESPN the other day, the graphic he made, you need a leader, you need a captain, no doubt, and you need a leadership group. I think Trocheck is that. I think he could be the man wearing the C. But the one thing I'm unimpressed by was he had a stretch that was good, and I feel like Trocheck fell off a cliff. And I know that that was the case for everyone, but it's like the sign you see in Meadowbrook Elementary School at the top of the gym that says character is what you see when no one's watching. Well, 18,000 people are watching you underperform on the ice for like a good 20 games. I just feel like that doesn't sell the point of him being captain very well.
That's crazy that you remember that. I think I could give you
Oh
the
my
last like 20 years of New York Ranger rosters before I could give you what was on on that wall.
on the wall of Meadowbrook. Dude, I thought you were going to reference the Got Milk posters at
Yes,
like High School Musical with the stashes.
That's funny, but
Oh,
I think I'm honestly surprised up to this point that none of us have mentioned this, but we have to, especially everything that's happened this year in this locker room, and this locker year was so divided, it was so broken. It was beaten to the core. The media and everybody was everything's. The walls were collapsing on them this year. Next year we need a leader. We need a leader. And I would agree with you. I think it should be Trocheck. It is a little concerning that he, the last 2 months that he really fell off a cliff and did nothing, minus that game in Columbus that he had 2 goals and I think like 4 or 5 points. But other than that, it's not even just that he hasn't been on the score sheet. He hasn't been making a difference. I haven't seen him. Haven't seen him be vocal or anything. He just, where's he been? And I think as we
yeah.
pivot to where this team needs to go and how we're getting right and process manage it and the system and all that kind of stuff in the offseason, we need to identify who is going to lead this team. And it has to be somebody that is going to be on this team for the whole entire year. It's not somebody that, they might be traded. You have to see where they are at the trade deadline. It's got to be somebody that we know will be on this team 100%. And for me, that person is Vinny Trocheck. So, Mike, go ahead. You look like you want to jump in.
I thought you were going to say JT Miller.
Oh, you know what? From what Staples said, I don't know if he's vocal enough.
I don't think so either. You like Steve-O said, you need a vocal leader. You need someone who's going to get in that locker room and like go up to guys and say, "Why in the hell are you not playing 100%? Like,
Yeah.
why are you not?" Because even if you're not producing, you gotta give an effort. And half of these guys weren't even trying. Like it is painful to watch some of these highlights for this Rangers team. Like they were making Lane Hudson look good. You know how much I think he's a terrible defenseman. Great offensive defenseman, terrible defenseman. But no,
Stay on track, Mike.
Yeah, let me stay on track. Sorry.
You were cooking.
But no, I think you're right, because when you think back to hell, it doesn't even have to be the 94 Rangers. It could be an example of the freaking 2019 Blues. Like, you need to have a guy like Messier, like Ryan O'Reilly, who's going to go up to you and say, do your job. And I feel like nobody's doing that in this locker room. And even
An
if it was someone
accountable
like,
figurehead.
yes. And I think Trocheck is close to that, but he's got to get there.
Well, here's the thing to me. Two things come to mind. One, Alan Creeda would always say this about Henrik Lundqvist. He said Hank was insane. Like the media would be waiting outside the locker room because like he'd be tearing into them, which is awesome. But that's what you need. The leader's not someone you always like either.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Trubo was that guy. I think Trubo was cordial, but I don't think Trubo was and maybe it was his leadership style, but he wasn't pulling guys aside and being like, yo, head out of ass. I think JT Miller's that guy on the ice, which we see every night, but I don't think when he comes in the locker room, he's that guy. But the other question I ask is Vincent Trocheck had, I think, inflated numbers last season. Unless Artemi Panarin's putting up 100 plus and the things are trending well for the Rangers, I don't think Vinny's going to hit 70 plus. I think he's like a 50 range point scorer. Do you want that for, the next 4 or 5 years of his contract? So that's the other thing I'd say. I don't personally care, but I also know that we've seen what happens when like Jacob Trouba's play drastically declined. That's in the cards with a player like that. That's at least how I feel.
Yeah, I'm happy we have JT though for a full year. I really think when you look at a lot of the structural things that we start to, see the ship kind of seep at the end of October and November and December, I think JT Miller fixes a lot, but again, it still doesn't fix a lot of the core fundamental problems of this team, which again, for me, the defense. And one of the big problems is this core, the inability of this core to perform. Next year, there's no more bullshit. Adam Fox needs a full healthy year where he steps up and gives you the results that we saw. What was it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? We need that year from Adam Fox. Adam Fox to me is one of the top defenders in the NHL. He needs to go out there and play like it because he is not. And I think we need that. And we need to really restructure this defense. First of all, I think it starts with Keandre Miller. Keandre Miller he was probably the worst Ranger this year on this team. I mean, defensively, it looked like he forgot how to play hockey. And ever since he who did he spit on the LA Kings? Forget who it
That
was.
was like Drew Doughty's visor, right?
Oh my God, I
2023.
forgot about that.
Ever since that, he's completely like fallen off. Like
Yeah.
if we could go back and make him not spit, maybe things will be different. But even last year in the playoffs, I mean, Keandre Miller was horrible. He took that bad penalty in Game 5 that ended up, costing us that game, and he's been horrible all year long with his. I don't know what his. Matt, you're the stats guy. If we have his plus minus. I mean, this year was it feels like Keandre Miller is minus 3 million this season. That's how bad he was. I mean,
Pulling it up.
every bad goal that we've given up, Keandre Miller was on the ice. You giving me that look?
He's only a -3, but
That's a
this is the
typo.
thing. No, but this is the thing.
I think that's a
No way.
preseason stats.
There's
Scroll
no
down.
way he's a -3.
Four games -3, one game -4. So, and I mean the litany of -1s is just crazy.
That's
But
not like that's not his season stat, -3.
-3 is his season stat.
There's no possible way. There's no possible way.
But no, that does not discredit what you're saying.
No.
Well, first of all, the fact that it took us 40 minutes to say the word effort in this episode is actually totally embarrassing on our end because that I think is the core issue. But it's funny. I actually think effort is more about the forward group and the forecheck. I
Agreed.
think defense is effort, but it's also like some of these reads, Steve, like you said, Keandre Miller's reads this year were just awful.
I feel like half of the goals against the Rangers this year, there's just 3 dudes just like in the corner. You're like, what are you doing? Get in front of the net. It just felt discombobulated the entire, I don't know, the period after the fall off. What do you want to call that? But it's just been terrible. And so Miller's contract is up next summer, right? Not this summer.
All right, well, boys, this was the next part of the conversation, which I figured, Steve-O, you didn't even wrap up your thought, man. I want to give
Yeah,
you
I'm
the
sorry. I
floor.
kind of
No, let's go right ahead. Keep it moving. Let's not.
All right,
Let's go right
Susi
along.
is right now listed with Adam Fox. He has a no move, which is nuts. I cannot believe that he has a no move. Um, but Fox needs a partner. He needs a Devon Taves. Like he needs a 1B, Brandon Montour, like the guy that can be your 1B, not a 2, not a 1A. Like you're not going to find a 1A, but a 1B guy. And that's going to have to be through a trade. But with that, you have to keep Susie as well, because what are you going to do with a no move? Borgen is solid. Miller, big question mark. Getting to that in a moment. Hold your breath. You have Vach and then Schneider. I'd really like to see Schneider move up in the lineup. I
Mhm.
really don't like to see him on the third pairing.
Yep.
But I want to hear your full thoughts on that stuff because Vox signed at the trade deadline until 27, 1.5.
Oof.
Is Schneider really going to be on the bottom pair in a contract year where you'd probably have to start paying him term and money? I don't think so. And I know that they like the way he plays. Susie's full no move is a problem. And obviously, Fox needs a partner. Steve O's talking about Miller. And this is the big thing about Miller, which is also the scary conversation about Will Cooley. They're both group two free agents. They can be offer sheeted, which is a good thing for Miller because I think there's teams that like his athleticism and like his reach and physical attributes. But Will Cooley is scary.
I think you do everything to sign Will Cooley the second you can.
You have
Absolutely.
to.
Have to.
And I think he will.
Me too.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I even think you give him if he asks for a little bit more than you're wanting, fine, screw it. He broke the hits record. Come on. Like and he's how old is he?
21.
So yeah, 20, 21. Like dude is and you know what? He put in the effort. He won the Stephen McDonald Award for a reason. He was the only Ranger, or at least one of the only Rangers, to make a concerted effort every single night. You give him a contract the second you can, so other teams can't try to.
I agree, 100%.
Miller, eh, if someone offer sheets him, oh no, let him walk.
My I agree with you. I think Keandre Miller, I can't trust him. I think
No.
what you saw this year, I mean, and there was no growth.
And he's
Like
25.
there was no getting better. But the problem is, take Keandre Miller out. Who are you replacing him with? I mean, this defense is already bad enough. I mean, you got Vakanainen. Will Borgen, I think, was great. I think, if Will Borgen on a New York Rangers team 2 years ago, back in 2022, 3 years ago, I think that was the perfect, complementary piece that really would take a team to the next level. But however, right now it's a piece a little too late. And this defense is completely shattered. I mean, what do you do with Adam Fox? Who do you pair him up with? Schneider. I mean, this defense it has a lot of question marks. And to throw another layer on there, I mean, for me, and Arthur Staple on the pod said it himself too. The third and fourth line are huge problems for me. I mean, they wouldn't even be good in the minors, let alone the NHL. So I mean, we need some major restructuring there. Go ahead.
But where are you putting your money? Because this is, Steve-O, you said what I knew you were going to say. Because you and I are like telepathic with how important the bottom six is and building like a legit bottom six. I don't know if they have the money to because, all right, Loff, do you want him playing his off wing? Is he going to be on the team next year? Is he trade bait? Is Kreider going to be traded? With that, you have Perot and Offman, wingers. So it's like, okay, maybe they're top six, but are those top six guys that you think can win the cup then with two rookies? You have Brodzinski, Rempe, Carrot, Parsonen, Berard, Edstrom, Kaliev. Kaliev's probably not going to be a Ranger. You have the defense to fix. So it's like you can only put your money, like you can only fix so many things with the allotted cap space you have. And that's where I'm concerned because the bottom six is like, do you stick with Berard, Rempe, Brodzinski and just try and get through and fix the defense? Or do you try and fix a little bit of everything it's kind of like what we saw. I mean, in some ways with the Yankees this year, where it was like, are you going to invest a buck on an Adam Fox partner, or are you going to try and split it up and fill some holes on the team?
I think
Well,
part
thank
of
God
it.
the Yanks brought in Max Fried. Continue.
Yeah, right.
Thank God.
Listen, that's a question. That's a question for a later time. But it all depends on what jury, and again, if jury's the one that stays, I think he will. But it all depends on what he sets this vision to be. I think you're right. The money is correct. You read my mind. I'm a little all over the place. I want everything. But hypothetically,
We all do.
yeah, of course, this is New York, baby. Come on. But when you look at it, you're right. It's either going to be defense or bottom six. I'm a big bottom six guy. But the problem is that, if jury's going to say, you know what, the core is staying intact, I'm going to trust the core, then he's going to work on the defense, because the defense was unacceptable this year. I mean, the amount of games that we scored and then the defense just like turned into mashed potatoes and gave up a goal another minute later, it's unacceptable, and it's not sustainable. And I think that's probably where we're going to pivot again. The defense is just not good. The bottom six is not great, but when you have a core and you have Zibanejad and Panarin and Trocheck and Kreider and JT Miller and Fox, and especially Igor as well, you could get away with not having the best bottom six. You look at the Rangers teams, that have been successful, throughout franchise history. Some of these teams did not have, crazy, crazy good bottom sixes. So I think with the way that the defense has been, the defense is probably going to be the top priority that I think that jury's going to attack.
It's got to be the top priority. Absolutely. And honestly, you're not getting someone internally to be that 1B, like you're saying, Chaps. I also don't think you're going to get it with a trade unless you give up a major asset. I think your only bet is going to be through free agency. And honestly, I think that's a can we kick down for a later episode, because I honestly have no idea who's even up on free agency next year on defense. But that one's going to be a tough get, because 1B defensemen are not nearly as easy to get compared to 1As or 2s.
Okay. I mean, I understand what you're saying. I think they're not as available, and if they're evident, that team has done everything to secure them, right, and keep them. But like, you have to identify a 1B if you're going to trade. That's either you give them a solid offer and package, or it's someone that you see on a second pairing that you think could be a one pairing. But I think the problem that Steve alluded to before was that if you move Miller, this defense is already not in the best spot. And what makes me, well, I'm not pleased to see that your right side is Fox, Borgen, and Schneider. And I honestly feel that Borgen earned that. He's definitely that second line spot. He's 28 years old, but I'd like to see Schneider up. And it's just hard to fathom that a guy like Schneider should be getting opportunities. And our left side right now is Susie, Miller, and Vakanainen. If you move Miller, by the way, Miller is I'm telling you, I believe he's going to be offer sheeted, and the Rangers will not match it. You have 1 week to match the offer sheet. He's not going to, the Rangers aren't going to match it. They're not going to pay him $5 million. And if so, I think that's going to cause like nuclear meltdown in the organization, or the fan base, I should say. But then you don't have Miller. You get a second round pick max in return, right? He earned $5 million on his contract, or Holloway earned $5 million, and they got a second round pick for him. Like, you only get a first round pick from an offer sheet if it's a star. That's not Miller.
I'm sorry, Brober was 5 and Holloway was 2.
Okay. So, like, you're getting a second round pick in return, but then you still need a second pair lefty. Do you just move Susie down and hope it goes well?
What's left
when you try and get that 1B?
What's left on Susie's deal?
He's got, I think, 2 years.
Oh my God.
And he's a no move.
He is not. For me,
no, it turns into a trade list, I think, next season or the season after. I'll look into that.
Thank God.
There's absolutely no way we could work around that because for me, he's not a long-term piece. I mean, he's just not good enough either. I mean, some of the mistakes he had 3 turnovers in one period. I forget what game it was, a couple games ago. Shit, I'm trying to remember. Not important. He's horrible. He's not that good.
I'd really like to see Johnny Brodzinski on the left side of the defense. I think
Listen,
he'd do better than the 3 guys over there already.
Johnny Broad is not good on defense either. Let's be
All right,
honest.
so here's actually how it goes, boys. Susi is 30. He's got a no trade clause this year, but next year he has a 12-team no trade list.
12 teams. Why do we give him 12? Why do we even give him the no move to begin with?
So that's the problem
What
with
are
the
the 12
Rangers I've
teams? I'm
noticed too,
curious.
boys. A lot of these contracts, when I was sifting through, which obviously everyone else can too on Puckpedia, Kreider 15 team consistent. That was a deal signed by JD and Gordon. Drury has like Trocheck's a no move this year, then 12 team, 10 team, 6 team as the contract gets further in.
Okay.
Now, I understand the reason that's structured that way. And the reason that is you're saying the more term we commit, the further out it's like it's going to be, we're going to have a more difficult time trading you down the line, which is showing a commitment because you're not expecting to move Trocheck next year, right? Like that's established, but that's a relationship that's been established. But it also does make you think like, well, when some of these guys are getting older, it's just going to make it harder to move them if we have to. Like, say Borgen really falls off next year. And he's really like your only other defenseman you can count on besides Fox. If Fox turns it around, I agree. I personally think the money's going to have to be pumped into the D. But it does make me question too, like the forward group is still quite unappealing.
But even with the D, I mean, we're talking about like, okay, how do you replace guys? Like, if you were to get rid of some of these guys, how do you replace them? What defensive prospects do we have? I was literally thinking, I was like, last night was the national championship game. I was like, Ty Henricks from Western Michigan. He's a left winger. I don't know why I had in my head that he was a defenseman. Who do we have? Like, you can't. I mean, okay, you have Zach Jones. We've talked endlessly about Zach Jones on this podcast. You have like Matt Robertson. All right, let's give him a shot. That's not solving any of the defensive problems unless you like bring up Matt Robertson and he's an absolute killer. Like it's just not happening. And
I think something that really soiled things too is that, sorry, Mike, just to mention, like Molly just reported that Drew Fortescue is going to stay at BC, and a lot of scouts believe that he's ready for the NHL. So it's like, well, now a player, you're not going to force him into the NHL, but that would have been a player that probably could have stepped in.
No, let him be a BC. You know how I am. Let him cook. Let him cook. Don't take him out of the oven until it's done.
I'm just saying he's a prospect.
No, absolutely. But if we're talking long-term solutions here, as soon as possible, what are we doing next? Like this offseason is going to be rough for the defense.
Steve-O, you mentioned it the other pod. Who was the defenseman that went from Boston to Toronto?
Ah, crap.
Brandon Carlisle.
Yes.
He was a guy that I could have seen. Like, that's the type of player you want in that position. I'm not saying Carlos specifically, but I'm saying that situation.
There's only one.
I agree, though, Mike. Oh, Steve-O, what were you going to say, brother?
Listen, I know it's not defensively. Like, I'll say it really quick. There's only one player I really want. Ryan Donato, I think, would be such a great piece to this New York Rangers team. I know this is not an offseason preview, but I really do think, like, he is kind of the Frankie V type shooter mentality that I think you could just plug in and move him up and down. I'd love to see him in this lineup. But again,
Do
you know who I would love in this lineup?
Who?
Frankie Petrano.
I don't think we'll ever see that ever again, unfortunately.
No. Rest in peace.
But the forward group, like you said, Mike, like there's prospects that can at least come in, like Perreault, Othman, Berard has played well, that you could cycle in. Like Rempe's going to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Steve, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the names here, and it's like, all
No,
right.
you're
I,
right.
I think the problem, like you're saying, Donato seems like enticing because it's top six, but that also speaks to the fact that if Kreider's no longer a top six player, it's like there's question marks, and you also have Loft still playing on his off wing, and Zibanejad had question marks as him being a winger, just as in general because he's supposed to be a 1C or at least a center. It makes you question like even those decisions. Are you pulling in more players to then try and solve problems that are like just fundamentally an issue?
I think if you bring in Donato in a perfect world, he would be your one forward ad, and then you could piece a lot of the other puzzles together. You would put Perot in there, you put Offman in there. Don't forget Edstrom in there as well. You could piece, a bottom six of the lineup, and then you would just have to focus, on this defense. And for me, like Mike said, and I really don't have an answer for this right now. I don't, the defense is the problem, and the problem is there's nobody in the wings ready to come up. And a guy like Zach Jones, yes, it's more clear to me now because the season's over and we saw it play out. Zach Jones is a fill-in. Zach Jones is the type of player when you're very structured, you slot him in there, and he's going to give you, an okay performance.
Hmm.
When we have a structural problem and the defense is completely shattered, Zach Jones is not an answer.
No.
He is not an answer to the solution. And I'll be honest with you, looking at all these guys on our defense, aside from Adam Fox, none of these guys are solutions. And that is a huge problem for the New York Rangers that really is very concerning. And I'll be honest, I don't have an answer. And I don't think any of us have an answer to this right now. I think Jerry's going to have to sit and really, figure this one out during the course of the next few months.
My problem with Donato, I know you're really high on him. It just feels like a paper plug to a water hole. Like you need caulk. You need someone who you're just gonna slap on that hole and the water's never getting out. I feel like Donato is just like stick it in. All right, let's go work on the defense while we're holding this in. Like it doesn't. Like okay, it might help next year, but that's also the question is going back to with Drury. What is the narrative for next season? What the hell are we doing? What are we going with? Are we?
Well, I think narrative is what we assign to it, but it's more of like what's the mission and what's the goal.
Well, the mission and the goal will dictate the narrative.
It's because again, everyone says, "Oh, the mission's the Stanley Cup," but like on paper, right? At least where it stands at the end of the season, that's not what anyone's thinking. And here's the bombshell I gotta ask you guys because we kind of circled around it. I genuinely think that there are the obvious, kind of like the trade deadline, the obvious moves that I think are going to be made. I think if a sucker doesn't offer Sheet Miller, they're just going to get rid of Keandre. I think Kreider's seat is boiling.
Right.
I genuinely think, based on two things, what was true yesterday is not always true today. Elliot Friedman, but I think Adam Fox and Alexi Lafreniere are not 100% safe. I think Fox is 95%, maybe 90. I think Loff is I'm not even going to assign a number to it. I think if you want to make a move, you might have to give.
Yeah, you can make the case that everybody's not 100% safe, but I think if you're 95% safe, you're safe. I don't see Adam Fox going anywhere, especially take Adam Fox out. We'll have me in the lineup. I mean, this defense literally is
That's
just
true.
so broken, and it's just I'm a loss of words. The season just ended. I don't know. I really don't know how you could attack it. And to add on to your point, Mike, I don't think we're gonna get Ryan Donato. I think there's just the defense is too broken, and he's gonna want a steep price too. And financially, I don't think it will work out. But in a perfect world, if we were better, Donato would be a great piece.
I didn't mean to crush your dream. I'm so sorry, Steve-O.
The dream
You know what,
crushed 2
Matt?
months ago.
Matt, I'm gonna entertain what you said about Fox. He had a worse season that I think most people want to admit. And I think I say want to admit because we know how good Adam Fox has been in the past. Almost at the same level of Kreider. Like it's kind of like a wince of like, oh yeah, Kreider had a bad season. Same thing with Fox. Like, oh yeah, he did not have a good season. But whereas Adam Fox won a Norris Trophy, Chris Kreider's never won the Hart. He's never won the Rocket Richard. So I don't think that Adam Fox is going to be trade bait. But if a player comes up, and we're talking big name player comes up, I don't doubt that you put Fox and Loft in there. I don't. I think you are sane as a general manager if you include Fox in those talks. Now, if we're talking someone like, off the top of my head, someone washed up, someone, really not as good as we really think that he is, maybe like an Anze Kopitar type. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there. Spitballing. No, you're not trading Adam Fox for Anze Kopitar. You're not trading Adam Fox for I was about to say Max Celebrini. Yeah, I think you would trade him for Max Celebrini, but I don't think the Sharks would ever get rid of him. But my point is, it has to be a big deal to get rid of Adam Fox. But I don't think it's crazy.
Like league shattering.
Yeah. I don't even. Yeah. But I don't.
Magnitude 8.
Yes, but I don't think that it's off the table. Is what I'm trying to say. Like there are some guys on this team like Shesterkin. He also didn't have a great season, but he also had the worst defense on the planet in front of him. Like Shesterkin, you're not trading Shesterkin. Like he's off limits. Even Panarin, he got 2 years left of him. He scored 90 points again this year. Off limits, not trading him. Fox?
I think that, like you're saying, if a general manager with 2 steal ones calls with a crazy deal, Drury might not hang up in his face. That's all I'm saying. I do have some instant regret insinuating that with the condition of the defense that we've talked about now for 20 minutes, that Adam Fox is like on the block. I just think that Larry Brooks had mentioned it on Spit and Chicklets when things were really falling off, and he did say the same thing about how like you might entertain it. To me, like the ultimate untouchable is Cale Makar.
Yeah,
and I don't think Fox has shown that he's that level right now.
No, I don't think
right now.
And he's had plenty of comparisons to Cale, and Charlie McAvoy's had a lot of comparisons to Fox. But I think like Kirill Kaprizov, if Billy Guerin one night got hammered and called up Chris Drew, was like, "What about Kaprizov for Fox?" I don't think you say no. I'm just saying.
Drury might say, "All right, give me an hour." Steve-O, this is the big one, is Loft to me, because I genuinely think he had another quite disappointing season. And it's not, to me, trade bait doesn't necessarily just mean like armchair GMing. I think I should phrase it as it is. Underperformed. There are question marks about their future and their performance level. I think what disturbs me with the team overall is when we talk about the season by season record, it was like, oh, well, we'll get a new coach because Gallant wasn't working with this core group. Get Lavi. Lavi, clearly the ship took a nosedive. And then it's like, all right, so we go for a new coach. Lafreniere's kind of grown into that. And I think it's time for him to show that it's not always about who's at the helm or the situation around him.
Yeah, for me, Loff is also a non-touchable as of right now. Not to say in the future he won't be. First of all, when we're talking about Adam Fox on the trading block, we're down in the dumps. That this year was a total disaster.
Yes,
that's how down bad we are.
And Matt Mugno is like an Adam Fox truther, man. I have supported him ride or die. So.
Listen, bro, I'm right there with you. I'm handing you the pitchfork, bro. I've been on Adam Fox's case for like the last 2 years. So, but I think again with everything that's going on, and especially all the other players we talked about in Kreider and Zibanejad, Fox is not top 5 player for me that would be moved, and neither is Lafreniere at this moment. I think when you look at the breakout season he had last year, if we still want to call it that, actually, yeah, we will. Let's be confident with that. He's shown what he's done, and I just this year is such a tough year to grade because everybody around him like had a bad year. If your name was not Will Cooley and Artemi Panarin for spurts of the season, you didn't play well. Nor did you have good stats, and to when you put Loff alongside those players, and yeah, Vinny did not have a great year either. It's hard for him, and I don't think again, we always circling back to this expectation conversation. Loft's expectation, I've already settled it. It was a little too high, but I still think that the burden, he's much higher and he's on another level than Kako was. And I think when you put him on a team with functional players, everyone else is performing, he's going to step up and he's going to produce. This year just wasn't that case, and I think next year's there's still a reality where he could thrive and make a difference. But I need a little more effort for him because I say it all the time. He's the Glaber Torres of the New York Rangers. Just on certain plays, the effort is not there. It just seems like he doesn't want to be out there. He's not tired. He just started a shift. And the effort's just not there. And I think that's something that we need to see. Improve. That's the first step of improvement that I need to see. And as of right now, I think he is untouchable. If it makes you feel better, aside from Igor, nobody, with the right phone call and offer is untouchable. But I think, we talk about vision and where this team wants to go. Fox and Loff are not being actively shopped. That's where I stand. Anybody disagreeing with me?
Yeah, no, they're not getting actively shopped. It's just kind of like if you get a call from, drunk Billy Guerin.
The problem with these guys, though, is that the internal conversation has to be approached. This has to be accounted for. You cannot look at Adam Fox's season and not directly talk to him. Mika Zibanejad and Alexi Lafreniere, because I think of all the Rangers, Zibanejad was one. Lafreniere was not a disappointment because of the numbers as much as effort. He never backchecks. That is such a problem. He is not committed to team defense. You cannot have that. You just can't have that. Everyone's got to be on the same page. And that's character. And that's also discipline. So those things lead directly into structure. And I think the commitment to team defense is important. The shame is, I think the best guy available on the market in terms of a head coach is Torts, but the organization will never do that.
No.
They'll never do that.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike.
But I think the point is that there has to be someone, like the people running the show have to be more accountable than this season, but even in some of the seasons past. I think Gallant in many ways was, and I think the core, who kind of in some ways proved they were soft to some things, were soft to kind of his, to his message. He had no problem calling them out. And I think they need someone that can do that. And I think they need players that can handle that. That starts with some of the players Drew's brought in: Trocheck, Miller, Cooley.
Yeah, and I also think that'll stem into the coach as well. Whoever will be the next coach of the team, because you have to remember, I'm surprised we haven't talked about this, an hour ago when we were talking about the coach.
You're right.
But let's say we get rid of Lavi, we bring in a new coach, and honestly, it would not surprise me at all if next year doesn't turn out to be a successful year. And you know what? Carter gets dealt, a few more pieces get dealt. What do you do with that coach? Do you fire him and you go to a rebuild and bring in a new coach? Or do you keep that coach and enter a rebuild? So I think those are the questions that need to be had with this next coach. Is this somebody that's is this a coach that could, transform a vision and be, a transformational figure that could bring an organization that to compete one year and then to enter a rebuild? Like, those are really tough questions to figure out on paper, So I think I'm kind of surprised. We didn't talk about that before. What would you guys do? You don't have to give names, but do you want somebody that's ready to win now next year, or do you want somebody that is able to, lead a rebuild and be here, sustainably for the next 3 to 4 years? What do you think? Or maybe a bit of both. What do you think?
Call me crazy. don't go with another NHL coach. Don't go with another retread. I'm sick and tired of retread NHL coaches. Go with a new face. You know what? That's what the Capitals did with Spencer Carberry. He's a fresh face.
I was just thinking him too.
Never coached before in the NHL, and the Caps were in the race for the President's Trophy.
AHL coach, though.
Huh?
He was an AHL coach.
Yeah.
He was an AHL. Yeah, of course.
Yes.
But I'm saying he was not an NHL coach. And look what he's done with the Caps. He is mean. He is tough. He is tough as nails. He's kind of like Motor City Dan up in Detroit for the Lions. Like it wasn't a coach before. It comes in and he is tough as nails and he wants to win. You don't need a guy who's a quote unquote NHL win now coach. You just need a guy who wants to lead his men to victory. That's all you need. I think, call me crazy, you give a hot pursuit to David Carl at the University of Denver. I think you do. Possibly the coach from Western Michigan, too. He looked like he was a crazy, crazy mother in the national championship. He was yelling at the refs left and right. But, maybe he doesn't have as much experience. But David Carl, he's worked with NHL prospects. He knows a lot of those guys in the league. Maybe you tap him.
So
I would also say Guy Gadowski for Penn State, but as a Penn Stater, I cannot lose Guy Gadowski. We can't have that happen. So don't touch Guy, please, for the love of God, Rangers.
So here's what I think, and I agree with Mike. I think this team it's weird balance, Steve, and I like the way you presented it because this has to be someone that can adjust with fluctuation of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not we bring in Mike Keenan and then he goes and then we're trying to figure it out again. Like we're not at that stage, but we also need a coach that can be ready for that moment. Like if this team does turn it around next year, which by the way, folks, they very much can. Like, is this a man that's ready to be in a Final Four in the NHL, an Eastern Conference final? But is this also a man that's ready to face the hard questions if they don't make the playoffs again? I think your NHL candidate, which to me doesn't feel like a retread, is Mike Sullivan.
I agree with that. I do agree with that, and here's why.
That's why I hate that I do.
I like Mike. I agree with you 100%. I think that is your ideal vision. We're just not ready for that yet because you look at this core and you talk about somebody that could adapt. Blah blah blah. You have to look at what our core is, and our core has got to be one of the least adaptational in the league. You look at Panarin a few years ago with Gallant and all that drama and that chaos that was stirred up. I mean, this team, we just talked about how this might be the last hurrah of this team. Let's be honest, I don't see that many more years of Chris Kreider, effectively being a New York Ranger. And look at Zibanejad, we might be looking at his time being numbered as well. So this would literally be one of the last few seasons where this is a retool. And I just don't know if a coach that you described, Mike, is ready to lead a retool. To me, that reads recipe of disaster.
All right. But, I'm just going to jump right in. But here's my question, Steve-O. When would the team be ready for that? Because we already had a new non-NHL coach coaching a rebuilding team. We're thinking if we're rebuilding, might as well have a fresh new face coach. How did that end up for David Quinn?
You're right, Mike. You're right. I don't have an answer to that right now.
I think the rebuild got ahead of Quinn. And I think I don't know if he was ready. He faced a lot of adversity. I don't know if he was ready for. But I do agree with you, Mike, that Carl and Firschweiler, Western Mich, Denver, those are the top two. But it's got to be a sweet offer. Like New York is a sweet offer. MSG, New York Rangers. But do they want to leave their programs? A lot of the word is that Carl has to be moved to leave Denver because he is a genius. Like he is going to be a great NHL coach the moment he steps into the league. He's very young. So I don't know if he leaves now, but is this a situation he'd like? And again, like you said, I don't know if you could use David Quinn as the only like comparison of an experience, but you saw that went too. But I think it's a very forked road. Like it's either got to be a guy like a Sullivan or it's got to be a guy like Carl.
Hmm.
Yeah,
It's not going to be from within because
Well,
you lost Knobloch.
we had this great guy in Hartford. His name is Chris Knobloch. Oh, wait.
yeah.
Oh,
Edmonton really won on that one. They saw their guy and they
yeah.
jumped on him. Credit to them.
Shoot me for that one. Shoot
The
me.
other thing I like about Sullivan is that I think he's hard.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, he's a leader of men. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Mike Sullivan
he's hard on the players.
he would do wonders for this team. I really do think he would. But the question is, if it's a sinking ship, do you want to bring in Mike Sullivan, who's a Stanley Cup winning coach again a leader of men? He brought those Pens teams to the playoffs that should not have been the past couple of years. Absolutely not. Whether or not it was also Crosby. I mean, of course, Crosby. Crosby's Crosby, but I think that Mike Sullivan did for the rest of the team. And yeah, in a weird way, I would feel guilty bringing a guy. Listen, I hate the Penguins, but I would feel guilty kind of bringing him on to an absolutely sinking ship.
Yeah,
Like
let's
the
rephrase.
nest got shot down. There's a hole in the hull. Like this ship's going down.
I agree with you. Rephrase that. Do you think Mike Sullivan would want to join a sinking ship after everything he's accomplished and to his caliber, everything that he's done? Would he want to be on board of this and say, why would he want to waste his time and ruin or tarnish his reputation? So I agree with you, Mike.
It's a good point.
This is why this is why NHL coaches will be interested in the Rangers because we keep saying it. They still have players.
They do.
Like coaches see that as an opportunity. Like Artemi Panarin, all right. Let's see what we can do. Trocheck dog, Cooley. That kid Cooley's a dog. Loff has shown that in the past. D needs some work, but the goalie's a stud. To you, it I think if you're a coach, you look at yes, there's some homework, but there's a lot that gets taken off your shoulders when you have some star players.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think we might be getting a little bit ahead of ourselves with all of this. But again, I think we've done a great job of laying the foundation of these are the conversations that are going to have to be had this season. So before we wrap, I'll leave you two, before we close the casket on this disastrous season, what are your final words before we officially lay the season to rest? The fact that you have to think, I think, sums it up. But go ahead.
I don't even know. I mean, what really sucks, we said it at the beginning of this pod. What really, really sucks, and honestly, what hurts me, like I have so much loyalty and so much passion for this hockey club. I mean, I know I don't cry. I'm going to bawl my eyes out when Sam wraps up. He's like, thank you, Ranger fans. Like, that's going to kill me. The fact that I am relieved that the season is over is just crushing to me. This season was crushing. That's the word I have for the season. Because in 2019, it was like we talked about. There was hope for the future. I have no freaking idea what's going to happen in the offseason and next season. And that honestly really, really hurts. It just hurts. I'm crushed.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike. If I had to go, I'd say thank God it's over. And I will say, why not? We were shitting on the Rangers all year long. At least we're better than the Islanders. We took care of business today.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
This is what I got to say, boys. So I'm going to start with some funny. The New York Rangers this season never had their chicken jockey moment.
Oh, for Christ's sakes.
That's right. That's the best thing you said all episode.
They never had the 6-5 overtime win. Oh, the popcorn's going everywhere. The kids are going nuts. We're going crazy. And I think that's what the organization needs. They need their chicken jockey. They need their trade, head coach signing. They need moments to build positive momentum. to close this season out, I think what hurts the most to me is seeing the core we knew that went from rebuild to now blow up. It will not be the same moving forward, and we won't have Sam Rosen moving forward.
Huh.
That hurts a lot. But I think to turn the page is going to be the most important thing from this year. Because I think if the fans and the organization drags their feet or more drama happens, I think it's just going to make it a lot harder. So I think moving forward, the, the fans need to be able to enjoy things again. Enjoy those moments, the trade excitement, signing excitement, head coach announcement excitement. And it's going to take a while, but that's where I think things need to head next year. And it starts with turning the page now. And that's actually why we wanted to record this episode. We've had our fans have been great this year. We wanted to get this all out so that when all those things come up, we weren't referring to bad moments,
Mhm.
28 bad losses, bad trades and signings. We want to be able to move forward and look at things in a new light. And that's, I think, what I'd hate to be a preacher. That's how I'd like to move forward is just turn the page. I think that's the way we did in 23 after that season had concluded pretty uh strikingly bad. But I think for a season that was bad, let's move forward because there's no other way.
I don't think we could end any better than that. So, with that being said, the 2024-2025 New York Rangers have been officially laid to rest. But turning the page, stay tuned to Puck Talk CS across all of our platforms for the off-season coverage when the playoffs settle down and the moves start coming out, coaching, players, all that. We'll be here to break all of that down for you. Thanks for listening and following along our journey for this course of the New York Rangers' devastating season. And always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.